Falcon Age is certainly a curious game. After playing through it over the course of a few hours, I found it unique and charming, but it's not without some particularly rough edges. But is that enough to sour the experience, or is Falcon Age worth checking out regardless? Let's take a deeper look. Falcon Age is set on a planet that has been colonized by an off-world corporation, its resources depleted, and its native cultures all but destroyed. Players control Ara, a prisoner of the colonial robotic forces, who befriends a Falcon chick that proves integral to her escape. The bulk of the game then follows their efforts to drive off the robot invaders and reclaim their way of life. Conceptually, I love Falcon Age's narrative. It's certainly not subtle in its damning of colonization, just look at the faceless, generally white androids that play the role of colonizer, but it's such an uncommon story to see in video games that I don't really mind it being a little on the nose. The actual plot, on the other hand, feels underbaked. The rebellion and resistance angles are all ones that I can get behind, but there's a more granular element concerning the player character's family that feels kind of underdeveloped, and the story feels like it ends just as it really ramps up. The game also seems to end before you really get to do anything cool gameplay-wise, despite having one really awesome mechanical hook from the outset. The titular Falcon is introduced fairly early and provides a fun and unique way of interacting with the world, allowing you to command it in a number of ways. You can make the Falcon swoop enemies and creatures, either taking them out completely or distracting them long enough for you to hit the killing blow, or you can command it to retrieve various items before returning to you, or simply airdropping the items straight into your hands. It's a cool mechanic to start with, but there are only so many different enemy types to keep the Falcon's use in combat interesting, even though it feels like there's a lot that could potentially come later. You have spider bots that the Falcon can simply deactivate and use as droppable bombs, drones that it can knock out of the air for you to kill, sentries that require you to open them up for a swoop before finishing the job yourself, and larger robots that require certain timing to your attacks, but that's all of the opposition you'll face. You can also use certain items with the Falcon, such as bombs that can be dropped on enemies and food that can imbue the Falcon with buffs and recover health, as well as a bunch of adorable cosmetic items and props that can be worn or played with by your feathered friend. Personalizing your Falcon is a charming aspect of the game, but like much of Falcon Age, I just wish there was more. But even the Falcon gameplay that's here is a little janky. Her pathing can lead to her getting stuck in certain areas, though moving forward will get her to follow you, and when you call for her to return to you, she can take a considerable amount of time. For something that's such a core aspect of the game, I would hope that it was a little more fluid and responsive, but it's just not. Beyond the bird, you have some basic melee and ranged attacks in the form of a stun rod that doubles as an electric whip, and you're generally using this in tandem with your Falcon when dealing with enemies. Otherwise, it's used to unlock gates and interact with locks, with the side activity of whip golf being its most unusual implementation. It's basically just golf, but instead of hitting the ball, you have to whip it over your head, with your distance from the ball dictating how far the ball will fly. It's neat for a little while, but I'd be lying if I said I found it engaging for more than a few minutes. There are also some really basic crafting mechanics that let you plant small crops and combine fruit, vegetables, and meat to make little Falcon treats, but that's really all that Falcon Age has to offer on the gameplay front. Thankfully, it has a very charming art style and a soothing soundtrack, so simply wandering in the game's world can make for a pleasant experience. The environments jump between vibrant, lush canyons with clear blue skies and dusty, arid outposts that remain foreboding until you clear out the local colonial occupants, and the characters you'll meet feature distinct designs with more than a dash of South Asian culture. Most importantly, your Falcon is incredibly cute to start with and eventually looks both awesome and mildly terrifying, and it's brought to life with a number of really endearing animations. There are a couple of visual hiccups to note, however. It wasn't uncommon to wander into an area and see a large chunk of the environment pop in out of nowhere, and on at least one occasion I found myself clipping straight into the environment itself. On top of that, there's the odd spelling error in the game's mostly text-based dialogue, which was always kind of jarring. But for the most part, I thought Falcon Age's presentation was rather nice, if a bit rough around the edges. Finally, I think it's worth mentioning that the game can be played with the standard PS4 controller or using the PSVR headset and PS Move. Since I was unable to test the game's VR features, I can't really comment on them further than saying that they are available. In addition to these options, the game also features Imprint Mode, which lets you experience its story with optional combat elements. It's a nice option to have, but personally I think that without any combat to spice it up, the game would wear thin fairly quickly. With that said, Falcon Age is mediocre. Don't misunderstand me though, I would definitely recommend taking a look at this game. It lacks a lot of polish, and both the plot and gameplay aspects feel like they end long before they have a chance to really get going, but it's such a unique and charming concept, and despite my issues with the game, it has a lot of heart, which has to be worth something.